Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name's Charlie. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Charlie.
The 12 traditions. One, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Two, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. Three, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. Four, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. Five, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Six, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. Seven, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues. Hence, the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Give it up for Chuck, man. No one does it better, man. That's some good shit, Chuck. Try to get on time. Okay, you guys, very lucky tonight. Our main speaker is Katie.
Hello, my name is Katie and I'm an alcoholic. And really happy to be here. I want to thank Jeff for asking me to come speak and putting up with me saying no several times till I could find the time to get here. And I'm so happy to be here. I want to welcome the new people. Is this anybody's very first AA meeting? That's probably a good thing. Not that I don't absolutely love the spirit in this room, but I can tell you that when I first got sober, I used to actually come to Rodeo. Linda's here. Linda and I used to come to Rodeo. I got sober in 1986. So you can do the math. I've been sober for 21 years. And we used to come to this meeting. I'll never forget, it was over in Beverly Hills, and the wardrobe was quite a bit different in 1986. We took a lot of time getting dressed to go to that meeting, I remember, and a lot of shoulder pads. I think hair was bigger. It was a very stylish organization and it scared me no end. I was really terrified of that big meeting. It took me a long time. It still kind of does take me a long time to be around large groups of people. I'll tell you more about my story as I get going, but I started getting loaded at a very young age. And consequently, socializing was something I only did while medicated. So when I first came to these very large AA meetings where everybody looked so very beautiful and lovely to me, it was almost more than I could take, and kind of made me need a drink. But it was explained to me early on the purpose of that meeting, and which I think the purpose of this one is too, is to know that, sobriety offers us a lot of things, and one of them is human contact. And for a lot of us, human contact is not our natural state, unless otherwise medicated. I was never very good with people unless I was, unless I was in another frame of mind. So when I first started coming to these larger meetings, I was explained to me by my sponsor, who I got very early on in my sobriety, that it was a learning experience. And I went to that Rodeo meeting week after week, and I finally did, as most things in my sobriety, I got used to that too and began to appreciate it. And it really warmed my heart when I saw all the birthday people up here tonight, and that one group of girls, and I thought that was lovely how she talked about her girlfriends and how many of them were there for her. And I don't know about you guys, but that was not my experience when I was out there, when I was drinking and using. I had a lot of superficial friendships, but the kind that connect with your heart and the kind of people that you meet that are walking this path, people that have been to hell and back, people that have, seen that dark side, and lived to tell about it. And, the fact that we cling together. That's the beauty of this whole thing. That's what makes this whole thing work. That's what started this whole thing. So that was really, really nice to see. I don't speak a lot at AA meetings. I speak, in other words, that's not really true. I do speak at quite a few AA meetings, but what I mean to say is I never quite know what I'm going to say. And for those of you that have been to some AA meetings, you've noticed that sometimes people get up and they have a thing. I remember when I first got to AA, I thought that you had to audition to be the speaker at the meeting. And like the good little actress that I am, I was running my speech. I thought, any day now. I just couldn't wait to talk when I was new. I just had so much to say. And as the years have gone on, I find I have less and less. And that's a good thing. I find the longer that I'm here, the more I feel one with you guys, and what you say is as important as what I feel I have to say to you. And that's one of the beautiful things that has happened around here. So many beautiful things have happened around here. First and foremost is I came here before I killed myself. And, sometimes in these large groups meetings where we're laughing and we're talking and we're joking, which is fantastic, sometimes I think it is important, though, that we all remember that this is a disease that will kill you. And if you're in here, you've been saved from that for today. And it's a really precious space that you get to sit in that seat and not to be taken for granted and not an easy one to get. To this day, I have people in my life that struggle to stay here. And I'm thinking of one person in particular that, he's done what we've all done. He's worked those steps, he's gone to those meetings, and he can't seem to stay here. The thing he has not done is been consistent. Sobriety, just like, I kind of look at sobriety not as like, it's sort of like how how people talk about the spiritual part of the program. I don't really think about it that way. I think about it as being a spiritual program. There is no part. And I also think that this becomes the way of your life. This doesn't just become something that you do, sometimes. And so it requires some consistency. It requires changing everything. That's what they told me when I first got here, and I thought, oh man, this is, I'm going to tell you about when I first got here. Well, I'll just tell you a little about me. I was actually, I was born in Hollywood, and I have never left. I grew up all over the Los Angeles area. I'm the eldest of 5. My parents were in show business, and they consequently traveled all over the place because sometimes my father had a job and sometimes he didn't. So we traveled all over Los Angeles. We moved to New York for a while. There was a lot of moving in the first 12 years of my life. I don't believe that I don't really spark to the notion that I was born alcoholic. I always think, though, that I was born afraid. And the reason I say that, and I know it so well now the longer I stay sober, plus, I should preface this. Anything that I talk about now are things that I've learned along the way. When I first got here, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything other than I had been getting loaded every single day, pretty much consistently for a 15-year period. And I needed to stop doing that. That's what I knew. Anything else that I talk about up here are the result of living my life and working the steps and self-discovery and hindsight. It comes after. So if you're new and all you hear right now is, maybe you're texting somebody right now, I don't know what you're doing. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. The fact that you're in here and you didn't get medicated or you didn't get loaded today, or even if you did get loaded today, you're in here tonight and you're not high right now, maybe. Maybe. Whatever. It works by osmosis too. There's some stuff we do around here, but I also think that if you just stay close, it starts to rub off on you and you will have that psychic change that big book talks about. Anyway, where was I? So I grew up around this area. We moved around. Oh, yeah. I don't believe I was born alcoholic, but I do believe, and the reason I know this is because I have children now. I'm now the mother of 3. And I watch my children, and I see them at the different stages that they're at, and they're not afraid. I mean, they're probably like normal adolescent afraid, some of them, but they're not afraid the way I was afraid. I was afraid of everything. And I had this kind of dark way of looking at the world. And I think about it now, and I probably, at another time, probably needed some kind of chemical balancing because I was off. And I didn't realize how off I was. What happened to me was when I was 14 years old, my parents took me to a doctor because they thought I had a weight problem. My dad was a movie director, so everybody had to look perfect. So, in my family. So they took me to this doctor. And the doctor gave me amphetamines. And it was the dawning of a new day. I was no longer afraid. It was just everything looked brighter. I was one of those kids, I wore black from a very early age. I went to junior high school dressed in black. It just was what it was. And didn't talk to many people, didn't have much to say. And those amphetamines got me chatty. I think I still wore black, but I smiled more, and I instantly remembered feeling different. This was followed by smoking a lot of pot. I needed to smoke a lot of pot with those amphetamines. And by this time, we were living down here in the west side of Los Angeles. And, I kind of looked at it, even though at that point I started sort of a daily maintenance of amphetamines. And then on the weekends, we would drink Red Mountain wine down here on State Beach, down at the end of Chautauqua. I'll never forget. And we'd sit right down there and we'd buy these big jugs of, so disgusting, Red Mountain wine. Man. And, but this is just what we did, and I think this was just kind of like what everybody was doing. This was, the 70s, early 70s, and I had no thought in my head that this was anything other than what all my friends were doing. So that's when it started. And, during those years I took a lot of psychedelic drugs. But the key to it is, in my story, is it's not about what substances they were, it's about how they made me feel. And, once they made me feel that different way, that phenomenon of craving set in, and then that, that addictive process went on that, I really do believe is very, solely ours as alcoholics. There's a lot of people I grew up with that were doing the same things I were doing, and they're not alcoholics. How do I know I'm an alcoholic? I believe what Clancy says. I'm an alcoholic because when I take substances, I'm never quite sure what's going to happen. Sometimes I'm going to get a get out of jail free card and I'm going to be okay. But other times it's going to be 5, 6 days later before I've, coming out of the fog. So that's how I know I'm an alcoholic, because I react differently to substances. So when I was 18 years old, well, a couple of things happened that sort of, I don't really like to talk about my drunkalog that much, but I guess I will. When I was 18 years old, I started working. I got out of high school. I started working on the road. I was in the music. I was working in music, and I traveled all over the world for like the next, 10 years of my life, on and off. I was just gone a lot, and I was on the road, and I was doing what it is that we did when we were on the road, and cocaine was around, and I married my first husband in this period, and he was a heroin addict, and it was just a big fog of abuse and fun. I actually had a lot of fun during a lot of this too. A couple of very key things happened that sort of changed. You know how they talk about we crossed that invisible line? A couple of key things happened. When I was 19, my mother died, and when my mother died, she'd been sick for most of my life, so I was. It was weird. It was sort of like, it wasn't that I was happy my mother died, but it was something that was expected. And so but I think that was the first marker of me kind of crossing an invisible line to when my addiction became more about necessity than just, kind of having a good time. When I look back now, it was probably necessity even earlier on. Because like I said, I think I had a chemical imbalance, which I think many of us do. I think we're self-medicating. That's my opinion. Anyway, so that happened. I was traveling. I was doing a lot of recreational drugs. I mean, I was definitely a speed freak. That's my favorite place to be. I like to be on the upside. Then I also like, Percodan and Valium to kind of even things out. And by the end, I liked, kind of pretty much whatever you got. Linda's over here shaking her head. Linda and I used to run around together. So Linda, I think I'm telling the truth. Am I telling the truth, Linda? Yeah. Because after you're here for a while, you start, wondering if you're telling your story or someone else's. Because after a while, you're just sort of kind of maybe blends together. But this truly is my story. A couple of key things happened right before I got here. I got here when I was almost 31 years old. And, for the last couple years of my drinking and using, second time that I crossed that invisible line, my father died. I went through a lot of early loss. In my 20s, my mid-20s, my father died. And this was out of the nowhere, completely unexpected, just shook me to the core. And what I did was, this was the first time I ever drank and didn't get drunk. I drank and drank and drank and didn't get drunk. And, I know this looking back now, that was definitely that big, I crossed that line. And what happened after that was it was just a 5-year period of me kind of stopping and starting on my own. That's what I'd say, because I'm a pretty smart girl, and I think I would have gotten here sooner if I hadn't been quite so smart. Because I could not understand why I could manage other areas of my life, but this area of my life had me. I couldn't get that. So I would kind of stop and start, and the last 2 years before I got here, I had this fantastic boyfriend named Spider. He was awesome. I just loved Spider. And I had one of those relationships that could only end by getting into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He was fantastic, and we just tore it up. I mean, it was interesting in hindsight. I look at it now, and during those years, Spider played in a band, of course. How could your name not be Spider, not playing a band? And there were all these people in the band that were the AAs. That's what we used to call them. And I never forget, we used to run off and we'd try to hide from you guys. Because, you know, he'd go play a gig, I'd go hang out with him at the gig, and then all of a sudden they'd all be there after the gig, you know, and we knew what we wanted to do after the gig. And so I can remember hanging out in the bathroom of what is now the Viper room. It used to be called the Central, and we'd have the door just bolted, you know, because if these guys were trying to, you know, in hindsight, they were trying to save us, you know, but, and plus, God bless Chucky Weiss. Chucky Weiss used to drive around in the car with Spider and I. Spider and I would drive around Hollywood. I had this red 69 Eldorado convertible with my hair ratted up to about here and big black eyes, and Spider would wear this white turban. God love him. And we would just, you know, and Chucky, sober Chucky, would sit in the back seat of the car, you know, and we were out of our minds. I don't know what he was doing in that car. He must have known he had a higher power. But anyway, it was wild, man. But we, so what ended up happening was, you know, Spider and I would tear it up, we'd break up, you know, it was just heartbreak, and it was like a country song. It was just so, you know, intense. And then finally one day Spider ran off with Lisa the Speed Freak, and I couldn't find him, and, you know, I was just out of my mind. You know, we're just crazy. I was just crazy. And I remember I came to an AA meeting looking for Spider's friends, because I thought, you know, he's, you know, maybe he'll be there. Now, the truth is, when I finally kind of cleared the smoke after about 6 months of sobriety, was I knew about AA from all those people that had talked to me. And I had that little voice inside of me that said, you know what, you have to do something about this. You know, because I was one of these people that would go on those 3-4 day runs, and then please God, you know, that's it. As I'm on the floor looking for white specks in the carpets with the things, the drawn. And I remember I had this tree outside my second-story window, and I thought there was a Rastafarian in my tree. I mean, it was just, you know, we're so insane. And, you know, and that had happened many, many times, that fucking Rasta was in my tree, you know. You know, just one too many times. So I knew, you know, when I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous looking for Spider, and he wasn't here. But you know what? I stood in the back, and his friends and all our, you know, there were people I knew. There were all these people I knew here. You know, it was like, what are you doing here? And, you know, and they were so happy to see me. And I stood in the back, and I kind of listened, and this was my first experience of AA, and I went to those meetings. I didn't find Spider, and then I didn't go back to that little group. I went down to Santa Monica so I could hide, you know. I think because I was so afraid somebody was going to see me. You know how we are. You know, like anybody's really looking. I mean, you know, we're all so self-obsessed. We can't keep our eyes off ourselves. You know, but I was convinced, you know, that I had to go somewhere and hide. So I went down to Santa Monica, and and in the meantime, you know, Spider and I broke up, and that was very, very sad. And you know, but it had to be that way. You know, sometimes it does have to be that way. You know, those kind of relationships. That's what our relationship was based on. It was based on getting high. You know, so when the getting high wasn't working anymore, that relationship was no longer. As heartbreaking as that was to me, you know, Spider eventually did get sober, stayed sober for a while, and then he OD'd 8 years later and died. And that's the truth of that story. And it's still, you know, happens more times than not around here. You know, Spider stood in the back of those meetings and actually stayed sober. I don't know how many steps he worked, but he stayed sober for a good amount of time. And then he just stopped going to meetings. And then a bunch of bad stuff happened, and then he couldn't get back. And I think he wanted to get back, you know, and he couldn't get back. And that's what happens to us. So if you're in here, stay close. You know, as funny as this shit is, I could tell you story on story, and I probably will. Anyway, what happened to me was I stayed sober for about 3 months. I went off to New York to do a job. I did that whole, like, well, I'm out of town, nobody's watching. So there I was, off and running one more time. I was there for a couple of months doing this job, and then I came back, and that real incomprehensible demoralization hit me hard. And I remember I came home, and I had this roommate at the time, and that roommate was still doing the do. You know, he was still doing what he was doing. And I couldn't participate anymore. I just couldn't participate anymore. And that's when I really got sober. Because, you know what, even though I didn't go to jail. Thank God I never hit anybody in my car. But, I was just brokenhearted. I just was so let down by my own lack of, I guess it was willpower. You know what I mean? I just felt like drugs and alcohol had such a broader control over me. And it was just, I was done. I could not, when I was actually able to say, I can't do this by myself, it was fantastic. I urge you, if you're in here and you're struggling with well, why do I have to do what he says? Or why do I have to do what the book says? Or why do I have to do what anybody fucking says? Because, we don't like to do what people tell us to do. I'm very rebellious. I don't want to do what your idea is. But, I have to tell you, if you can remain humble long enough to realize that in this area of your life, you don't know what time it is. Otherwise, you would not be sitting in this AA meeting on a Friday night. If you can do that, it will open up so much more for your life. There's so much power in being able to say, I don't know how to do something. I surrender. And, if you need to, what you need to do is you need to believe in something greater than yourself that can help you. Let that be the group. For me, God concept was not a stretch. I had hung out with the best of, astrological cocaine dealers. My best friend was a cocaine dealer, and she did astrology charts, and I thought I was very spiritual. And I took a lot of acid, and I'd drive around looking for this star called Kohoutek, if anybody remembers that. So I thought God and I were on the beam. And, so see, some people did that. Oh, man. So, the truth was when I got here, and basically the concept was that I needed to surrender to a power greater than myself and made a decision to turn my will and my life over, it was the easiest thing I could possibly do. And this is how I do that. And I do that to this day, is I just really dumb down. I dumb down. I don't ask what it is. I don't care. I don't need to see it. I don't need to have proof that there's a power greater than me. The fact that I stay sober shows me there's a power greater than me. Because me, I can't do it. I tried. And I'm very smart and willful. And I can do a lot of things. But I can't do that. I can't do that by myself. So that to me is probably one of the biggest spiritual awakenings I ever had, is when I had a little bit of time sober and I realized that. That was deep. That was spiritual. If nothing else, changing your behavior is a very spiritual act. Every time you can show discipline, which we're not, as alcoholics, I loved how the first speaker talked about his adolescent nature, because I so relate to that. When you start checking out at a very young age, which I did, so I'm 14 years old, so I sober up, I'm 31 years old, and I'm acting like I'm 15. And that's kind of what happens, which probably explains all those marriages I've had in sobriety. No. Well, true. But, we do have sort of an adolescent, we're kind of having to catch up to ourselves. It's one of the beautiful parts of us too, though, if you really look at that. It can be uncomfortable in certain situations. I remember when I was newly sober and I didn't know how to, one of the main things, so many things I didn't know how to do. I remember one sponsor, I didn't know how to get dressed in the morning, if anybody relates to that. Trying to figure out the right outfit to wear really could drive me to drink. Truly, and it reminded me, because when I was in the 8th grade, I had like this little nervous breakdown, and my parents, and a lot of it was because I couldn't fit into the socializing part of my junior high school. My parents sent me away to a boarding school for 1 year, where the biggest relief was I could wear a uniform. I didn't have to deal with all that kind of like what to wear. I know she's laughing because maybe that happened to her too. So I had this sponsor, my very first sponsor, I loved my first sponsor, her name was Brenda. And she was so beautiful. And she had 6 months of sobriety. And I thought, oh my God, she's just a god, And She was beautiful. She hadn't gotten fat and horrible, and boys still really liked her. I mean, this is why I chose her. They say like, gravitate towards what you aspire towards. And I'm telling you, when we get here, I mean, for me, that was as far as I could go. You look good, boys like you, okay, you're my sponsor. And she said to me, I said, I don't know how to get dressed in the morning. She said, lay your clothes out the night before you go to bed. And that really worked for me. And I know that sounds so inane, but it's a very simple concept that, you know what I mean? It's like, but those are the little simple ideas that strung together make up a life. Because when I got here, I didn't know how to do a lot of things. I didn't know how to talk to you. I didn't know how to go out to coffee with somebody. I didn't know, God forbid, how to date or have sex, which came much later because I was, I thought I wanted that, but Jesus Christ, I had no idea what to do. Really. So anyway, so I had this first sponsor. I'll talk a little more about Brenda because I really believe if you're new, you should get a sponsor right away. Well, the first thing you should do, this is the program according to me, is I think you need to read the big book. What do I need, 5 minutes? Oh my God. You need to read the big book because the big book, you need to know that you're an alcoholic in order to stay here. And through reading the big book, it really helped me. I related to so much of it. I was able to really concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. These steps work if you concede to your innermost self that you're an alcoholic. This is not a program for people who think they might be. I don't believe. You need to do that, and also for me it was very helpful to get a sponsor, and I worked my steps very quickly. I don't believe that the steps were written to be done over a 5-year period. I think the steps were written to be done right away. Those guys were in dire straits. Those guys that wrote that book, they needed to dry out. They needed to relieve their guilt. They needed to feel better. We're addicts. We want to feel better. For me, I wanted to get to that 12th step so I could have that spiritual awakening, because that sounded like I was going to get high, Let's go. I wanted to get there. So I worked my steps very quickly, and this is what my loving, beautiful sponsor did with me. And when I got to my 4th step, which, I said to her, I can't remember anything. I can't remember anything about anybody except for Spider. And she said to me, and I was crying in months, and Spider, she said, just write it about Spider. So I did. That was my whole 4th step. It was all about, he did me wrong, I did him wrong, Lisa the speed freak, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? That was my first 4th step, and that was the best I could do. And then I read it to her. And that fifth step will just take you to a place you've never been, because you're going to get rid of shit. You're going to get rid of secrets. We got to get rid of those secrets because they make us feel so bad. That alcoholic head wants us to feel so bad that we just want to die and get loaded again. It's all it is. That's what it is, And we just think we're so bad. We have to tell another person, and then we tell them this thing we think is so bad, and they look at us like, well, so what? Takes all the power out of it. Takes it all, and you're just lifted up. I know this sounds, I have to stop soon. I could probably keep going because we're only at step 5. I like all of them. But I would encourage you, if you're new, go to your meetings. Don't miss your meetings. Hook up with some buddies. Find a sponsor. Just really find somebody that's done this before. And they don't have to be perfect, and you get to have a whole bunch of them as you stay sober. I've had 3 or 4. You don't have to interview and blah, 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 blah. Just find somebody that's got what you want. Humble yourself. That's the whole deal. Anytime we ask somebody for help, we are humbling ourselves. That's a powerful thing to do. Anyway, I really hope that I've said something helpful. I'm so, so grateful to you guys for helping me stay sober one more day. And thank you, Jeff, for asking me.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I don't, not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.